Welcome back to For St. Pete's Sake, the podcast where we deep dive into everything political in Pinellas County and beyond. We're sponsored by the Stonewall Democrats of Pinellas County, and we're here to bring you real conversations about real change. I am not Christian, who usually does our intro tonight. He's our president emeritus of the Stonewall Dems. He's not able to record with us tonight. He's got some family stuff going on, and nothing too serious, but hearts up to Christian and his fam. I am Laura. I'm the current president of the Stonewall Democrats, and I'm here tonight with a candidate for the Congressional District 13 of here that encompasses Pinellas County here and is currently held by Anna Polina Luna. So tonight that we have one of the candidates for the seat in the primary, and his name is Earle, and we'll let him introduce himself. Welcome to the podcast, Earle. Thank you.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. It's an honor to be with the Stonewall. It's exciting just to get out, and it's exciting to talk to people and meet everyone. And yeah, it's just, I think we're in for a reckoning. Obviously, there's all stuff we see in the news, but I think one of the new things that are coming up, and I talk to other people running for office, is this new generation of Democrats where we're really trying to start from the bottom up. And that means
Absolutely.
rooted in the community, meeting you, shaking your hand, looking you in the eye and hearing what you have to say. So again, super excited to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. I know. That's what I'm for, a little background about me. I grew up in Ohio, and my dad's an elected official in Ohio and has been since I think I was like 11 when he first was appointed. He was on city council first and then is county commissioner now. But I just remember, yeah, back in the day, we're out. I don't care. My parents didn't care. I'm 12 years old. They got me out there knocking doors, handing out lit, doing phone calls saying, "Will you vote for my dad?" I feel like we got away from a lot of that,
Yeah.
especially during the pandemic. Obviously there were various reasons for that, and various consensus on whether or not that was good to step away from it or not, but we did. But I love that we're getting back to that, just like community core organizing.
And yeah, I think for me too, it's this new idea of, I think, being somewhat of an outsider, and I'm sure we'll get into this too, is I'm not connected to the political establishment. And, when you're an outsider looking in, you think, what can I do better? And, you know, when you join, Facebook groups and you see all the infighting with Democrats and holding them to impossible standards and fighting, all of our energy is being directed here and not there. And so already out of the gate, we've had the opportunity to canvas with Keandra. Um,
Yeah, Keandra Darling, yes, running for state house. Yeah.
and Jennifer Webb will be linking up with this Saturday. And
Yeah.
this is just Democrats connecting, right? This is not endorsements. This is just us trying to build something because, people are going to criticize the National Party. People are going to criticize the Florida Party. But the reality is it's up to us. And it's up to us to connect with the communities and make them feel like, hey, Democrats, we have the ability to change, change people's minds, but also change stuff for the better. So it's just, and like you said, I'm a Florida transplant, and I was raised for the most part, and so don't hold that against me. I know the Florida, but I grew up in Wyoming, and it was one of those things where it was somewhat isolated for a long time from the national politics, and you kind of like each state. I mean, I'm not super old. I'm in my late 30s, but every state kind of is unique. And,
Mhm.
a Republican in Florida is different from a Republican in Wyoming and vice versa. And,
Very true.
we had our regional differences. And when everything became so nationalized and it just divisive and nasty and fear based, and it's really captivated people. But I really feel, you know, these young Democrats that are just feisty and trying to do the right thing, I think that's clicking with people.
Absolutely. And we've mentioned this multiple times on the podcast. I think a reason that that clicked with people is the authenticity, like they're, for, us millennials that are getting our feet wet and getting out there and running things. They're just like, we just like, we're collectively as a generation, we're like, no bullshit. Like, just don't come at me. Don't come at me with your spin, your mess. Like, tell me what you think. Tell me what you believe. And Gen Z very much is even more like, don't mess with me with your trickery, you know what I'm saying? Yeah.
And no, and that's the message, right? And that's where I think Republicans have been so good is they come out with whatever, and we struggle because we get stuck in the nuance and context of stuff and trying to describe something rather than the Republicans always just use the catchphrase or something that's really attracts people and it's easy to repeat. So that's where we always struggled. But I think with newer people coming in and thinking, hey, I could do something different, and not everything is going to work. Like, I'm not a political person. I don't, I could fall completely flat on my face. I don't know how this is going to end, but the reality is you have tons of new Democrats trying new different things. And I think the most important thing you kind of mentioned, millennials, right? We are grossly, and I mean grossly, underrepresented in Congress. And whether we lived through the recessions and we lived through the global war on terror, and then
Yeah.
now like COVID, and now we're going back to whatever the
I
hell this is.
ran rack again.
Yeah,
Like,
so
yeah.
and so ultimately it's us, like, we have this opportunity, but also we're trying to break away from the establishment, the big money backers, and you see the division within the Democratic Party. And as a non-connected person, I see that as well. And it's and you s- I will say it's heartbreaking now that I'm a political candidate running for Congress and I kind of see how the money is used and how necessary it is. And it's one of those things where, like, you have to play the game to win it. But again, we're seeing success with candidates that shouldn't be raising hundreds of thousands of dollars because their story resonates, and it mean you have a radically different experience than a majority of the people in power. So, what it comes down to is we're just normal people. We're literally I mean I'm just a normal guy. So,
Yeah, for sure. So, okay, you're a normal guy. You grew up in Wyoming. Like, tell us a little bit more about yourself. Tell us
um
about your background.
so for me, I somewhat of a military brat, kinda. My dad was serving in the US Air Force. I was actually born overseas in Turkey, and then had military family. Both my grandfather served, uncle served. And then when my dad decided to get out, put his roots down and raise a family, he really liked Wyoming. And you can imagine what it's like growing up in the least populated state, and it's a large state. So I'll say, like, I stayed there till my early 20s, and I loved the sense of independence and pride you get from growing up in Wyoming. And thankfully I graduated from the university. But that being said, you're somewhat isolated, right? Like, a lot of the cultural experiences that I think a lot of people have in cities growing up, I didn't have. I mean, we had people, but it wasn't like out there. And so it wasn't until, you went to college, and I was a convert, right? Like, I grew up and I thought I was Republican, and then when you go to college and you're
You got
forced
infected with that liberal
and
woke
you're
mind virus.
and you're forced to be like, "Hey, empathy and compassion is cool," right? Like, that's cool, like, to be nice to people. And, "Oh, these people are, like, oh, they're from a different country, but, they're cool, like, let's hang out." And you're forced to, not forced, but you have opportunities to talk to people and you connect with them on a human experience, despite whatever personal stuff, like, whatever their background is, culture or whatever. But you connect with people and you're like, this is cool. And I will say, like, the University of Wyoming, it was one of the things I brag about is I went to the flagship university in Wyoming, like, but there's
Yeah,
there's only one 4-year university, right?
right.
But the thing that they did, despite it being in Wyoming, like, you had to take, like, gender studies classes, right? And
Oh, okay.
and I remember, like, like, I took an like a transgender class, and I didn't realize it at the time that in Colorado, I had like one of this like a surgery center that was, a lot of them came to, and you have a guy from Wyoming with almost no experience with like that population, and it was such an eye-opening experience because it's like, again, empathy and compassion and like treating people with respect and dignity and getting into the like is this is not a political issue. This is like a moral issue, it's right and wrong. Like you should never punch down. And that's kind of how I live my life up until this point. So yeah, so I graduated University of Wyoming, and I was like, I'm sorry, went off on a tangent there.
No, you're
Um,
perfect.
but yeah, and then I went and I enlisted after I graduated. I took a weird path. I enlisted in the U.S. Army, and then I went into the infantry. I thought I wanted to deploy. I didn't deploy. I went to a what they call an Op 4 unit at the Joint Readiness Training Center, where you train soldiers. We train light infantry, special operations, and did that for 3 years. I was at an airborne unit, jumped out of planes, got to do that, and then ultimately in 2015 is when I came to Florida, and I was lucky enough to use the GI Bill, and I went to law school in Orlando, and again,
Very nice.
and it's like and I came in right during Trump administration, the first one, and did voter protection, and then given the results of that election, I went to work for the ACLU because obviously that's the only thing you could do, and it was just this snowball effect of service. Worked for the VA, graduated, worked at the state attorney's office, and then ultimately in 2019, my wife finished her OBGYN residency, and she wanted to come to Tampa Bay, and we've been here ever since. And then what kind of got me into this current situation is in 21, I went to work. You'll hear me say it in my stump speech, but I love saying it, is I went to work for
Yeah.
the greatest three-letter agency in the world. That's the way I feel, and that is the IRS. I love the IRS. Do you so
Listen, I'm by trade and I'm a probate and estate planning paralegal,
oh,
so
okay,
yes,
oh,
I get
yeah.
you.
You're right. Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, okay, yeah, we'll have to talk offline about this because
Yeah, perfect.
so the program I worked in is the estate and gift tax program. So
Yep.
I specialized in high value estates, and the IRS sends you away to the IRS school for 3 months, and you deal with very, generally speaking, not always, but our floor is like $30 million. So you're
Right.
going to war against the oligarchs. Like you literally,
The elites.
you're fighting the billionaires. And but also I experienced, I was doing my job. I love my job. I honestly thought I was going to be there the rest of my working days. Like I know it sounds crazy, but I loved working for the IRS. I absolutely adored it.
Absolutely.
And but with Doge, you saw the attack. I saw my mentors, colleagues, coworkers, veterans, war veterans, volunteers. So all these people treated like garbage. Then you have the DEI implementation or the war on DEI, where I mean, it was crazy. I'm sure you walked into a government building and they had those like cheesy 80 signs of like it's a black hand and a white hand, like saying, "No, let's work together." And you think about
Right.
that's stupid. Like we don't need that anymore. And they were tearing that down, and you realize it was there for a reason. And so
Correct.
it was through that entire process. And IRS is one of the oldest agencies. Like they just don't never have funding for hiring. So a lot of those people stayed. And given the experience I had, and this I'm younger, I probably have the ability to navigate the private sector, and I can't be on the sidelines for people I care about, and that means something to me, and I'm also not okay with how I see politics as usual. And so I had to leave my job, and I launched the congressional campaign, and now we're here. And now we're
Yeah.
doing cool podcasts. So so
Amazing.
yeah.
Yeah, I actually no, I love the IRS, weirdly enough. Like, even though, like, as on the probate and paralegal side, I'm usually trying to help my clients not pay those
Mhm.
taxes. But, I
Yeah.
do the IRS is so important because, like, people want to talk about the tax raise, lower, blah blah blah. Like, if we and I don't think I mean, I think if we can just fully fund the IRS and properly enforce our tax code as it exists now, we could things would be so much better. Things could be better. Like obviously the estate tax, like you said, the floor is 15 million individual, 30 million per couple.
Yeah,
Like
for
it's
sure.
just it's astronomical. And but still, like, there's ways to, like, people get. I don't know if you remember when, I think it was yeah, it was during Trump's first administration that New York Times did, I swear it had to have been 10,000 words, if not more, on his Trump Senior's estate plan and how that went through. And I was mad, but like admired it. You know what I mean? Like the attorneys just are creative humans, but we need more people in the IRS to,
Sure.
like,
And
fight that.
and that was the thing too. I think a lot of people like the IRS is really belongs it's an agency for the people, right? And ultimately
100.
it's you have obligations to pay taxes. It's the price you pay to live in a civilized society. That's I mean, I forgot what justice said that, but that's generally how we see it, right? And ultimately, IRS gets you social security checks, and it gets you disability veteran disability checks, and it, funds our roads and our transportation and those really cool Air Force jets that we like, and the Navy, and all those cool things that we have. The IRS funds. But the other thing too is to put it in perspective, and these numbers might be a little off, but for every $1, I think it was the IRS spends auditing a normal person like me and
Mhm.
you get like the government gets like $5 or $6 back. For
Right.
every $1 that the IRS spends going after high level people like we dealt with in the estate and gift tax program, and there's another program called the Global High Wealth, it was upwards of $12. But the thing is, it's very expensive when you just look at it as numbers only. It's very expensive for us to work a case. So it's the position was in, it used to be called a state tax attorney, and they changed it. There's all these rumors as Trump didn't like. There's actually a rumor going around that
Yeah.
Trump hated this state and gift tax program. I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
Oh, I'm sure they'd love
but
to abolish it.
so, but yeah, so to put in perspective, like a case that I'd get, you're dealing with, say a $500 million case, you're dealing with real estate, right? And
Mhm.
then you probably dealing with art. And so you need people to handle the valuation of the
Amazing.
real estate. Then you have to do art. We literally have an art appraisal team. Like literally,
Yeah.
there's a team that in DC you send them a package, like here's the art, and they determine the cost of the art. We have wine analysts. We have jewelry. Like we have all these experts, and that's before you get into numbers games. Like so, we have what's called IRS engineering who do very complex calculations on like policies, like the future value of a policy, and they do dividends of a dividend and all this crazy stuff. And then
Really intricate math.
well, sometimes when you have a case, you're bringing on like 10 different people, and that's before you bring in IRS counsel, and that's before, if it goes to district court, then DOJ has to get involved. So it is very expensive. So like the taxpayer may be presented like, hey, this might be $1 or $2 million, but at the end of it, we might take home $100 million or something like that.
Right.
So it's really disheartening to know that my program got decimated. I know Global High Wealth got decimated, but the reality too is normal people don't have all these avenues to minimize their estate tax bill, right? And you have like the ACS, the automated collection system, and that like automatically goes after people. And a lot of the low level stuff is, I mean, it's a computer really,
Right.
and so, like, normal people are still gonna get hammered, and most of the tax is gonna be asserted on people, and they just don't have the funds or the attorneys to fight the IRS. But meanwhile, those at the top, and, I hate saying this, but one of my former colleagues, I talked to him, he's like, "Earl, we're operating on the honor system right now. Like, we are not, they have decimated our ability to do anything to be effective and do our jobs." So ultimately, it stinks, because there's no accountability for the billionaires or wealthy people. This is going to hammer like Social Security and Medicare, Medicaid, all these programs already on the chopping block. And this administration is still spend, spend, spend. Like not only me and you are going to be paying for this, but I don't know if you have kids or not. I have a 4-year-old and 1-year-old. I mean, future generations are going to be paying for this, and it's completely unacceptable. And so and it just honestly lit a fire under my ass that, like, things have to change and we need new representation, and I said it, like, in my speech. In a speech I had the other we need somebody to drop the hammer on these people, and
Mhm.
that's the worst thing you could do is have somebody like me with no corporate money, no foreign lobbyist money. I'm literally powered by the people,
Yeah,
and
love that.
I want to go after the people who have made our lives miserable. Millions of Americans are struggling, and I want to hold those people and make them pay a price for what they did, for what they're doing to us. So,
Yeah, I mean, that's what it is, you know what I mean? Like, we've talked in this podcast so many times. We've talked to, last cycle, we talked to Sabrina Boosbar and Whitney Fox just about how expensive it is to run and how hard it is, to get off the ground. And especially like, Sabrina was a Gen Z, woman of color doing it, coming home from grad school. And like, it's just the limited, just like, especially, I think for someone like you or and Sabrina who's Gen Z, like a lot of people when they have, when they're older or like come from, more wealthy situations, they start with their, immediate circle to do donor asks. And when like, I don't know about yours, but my immediate circle is like, I mean, I can give you $20, but that means like 20 less dollars in my gas tank. And of course, me, I would be like, well, no, I'd rather have you put money in your gas tank. Like that's more important. So it's just, it's out of the, and I can put, a tinfoil hat on and go for a really long time about, Citizens United and corporate
you know.
money and John Roberts and how, and, I've got a whole spiel.
No, but that's honestly why we're here. Like, Citizens United might be the
Yeah.
worst decision in U.S. history.
Yeah.
Not necessarily the worst, but it's up there.
One of
And
them. It's ranks.
yeah,
Yeah.
if we're gonna take the entirety of U.S. history, that's why I was like, okay, there's been some pretty bad ones
Yeah.
in the last, I don't know, maybe 100 years.
In modern history,
You know?
yeah, it's
And yeah, and you see the spending of the billionaire class. There's a graph that just shows it's like exponential once Citizens United was overturned. So it's just, again, I think the other thing too is, like, people like me and you, we're not asking for a handout. We're not asking for anything free. What you're asking for is a fair playing field, right? You just want fairness. And that kind of goes back to what, to me, what it really meant to be like, growing up as an American. Like, I know you probably felt it when you were a kid. You're like you're proud of your country. Your country was never perfect. It was never perfect. But we actually had morals and values that allowed us to keep inching towards it. And, you think about all these institutions and all these, things that were built for us, whether it's like our public school system or, or again, Medicaid and Medicare, like making sure we take care of our people. And now it's just pure greed. And I think having the experience of the IRS where we actually see, because when you quote unquote audit somebody, you go into very detailed aspects of their life,
it
right?
gets personal.
I'm sure you experienced, but I mean, we're pulling bank records, we're questioning where their money's going, we're seeing their like checks, we're looking in all their bank accounts. We are diving, it's a very aggressive dive in, and seeing what like you just mentioned, $20 to some people might be, whatever, $20, but some people, not even some people, most people are hanging on by a thread right now.
Absolutely.
$20 is like,
Could be a lifeline.
yeah, exactly. I mean, literally. I mean, whether gas to make sure you have another week at your job, or, make sure like your kids aren't going hungry for the next week. That is the reality for most people. And I'm, and like I've lived that reality too. Like, I grew up, my dad was enlisted, but we weren't wealthy. I grew up on food stamps. I grew up on potted meat and ramen noodles and spam. Like, I know that life, and so, or when your mom's embarrassed and sends you to go in the store to spend the food stamps for her. Like, I know that life.
Yeah. Yeah.
But but ultimately, like, I took advantage of, like, government programs and stuff. And when you help people and you invest in people and you uplift people, there's a good return on investment. People are good. Like,
People
it's
are good.
incredible. Like, people are good. And so So that's kind of why it's I big picture, that's kind of how I feel. Like it's just government needs to work for people, never punch down. You uplift people and you invest in them and treat them like humans again. So
So here, let's say you get through the primary and you're a candidate, okay? One of the things that I've been struggling with in this race is that Rep Luna, Anna Paulina Luna, is like, especially in the last year, has been a broken clock, kind of, hitting the right time every once in a while. She did advocate for, when Speaker Johnson cut off the voting by proxy. She advocated for that as a new mom, and then she's been very much holding Epstein files to the fire. Like, how do we like pivot and say like, okay, yeah, she's done right a couple of times, but like, remember she voted against FEMA funding. You know what I mean? Like, what would be your plan against her?
So I think the big thing is like the big. I mean, I could spend all day on Paulina Luna,
Yeah,
and honestly, the only reason she was okay with the proxy vote is because it affected her, right?
her. Yeah, no, I
Um,
get that. Yeah.
and like so, and that's the same like her thing with like and uh congressional insider trading. She's against it, but she also holds private stock in her donors. But again, I don't
Mm,
want to spend too much time. The reality is, what it ultimately comes down to is you have a representative that has zero interest in being accessible or accountable. She hasn't hosted a town hall. She's been all over the place, whether it's Russia or dilly dallying, making sure her Instagram's on point. The reality is she's we could go in the FEMA, we could go in the fact that she didn't extend the subsidies, we could go
mm-hmm.
into
The
whether the
ACA
funding of
subsidy.
ICE, like the continued
Yeah. Oh
funding of
yeah.
ICE, and as a person of I'm a mixed background. My mom's Hispanic, my dad's half black, half white. You know, and as a former federal employee,
Yep.
and
The Doge of it all. Yeah.
so I think the reality is even when I talk to Republicans and Democrats, they know that she's not interested in the fight for them. Yeah, she's she might hit the nail on the head every once in a while, but the long game is she has zero interest in Pinellas County, right? And
Yeah,
it's
correct.
and she's doing nothing to make life better for the people there, and she has zero interest in it. So how do you do that? And one of the things I kind of bring up is, and you'll hear me talk about this ad nauseum too. How do you win in a +5 red district, right? I
Mhm,
was, and I look to leaders like not Newsom or anything, but Andy Bashir, and the governor from Kentucky. And it comes down again to that basic principle of talking to people, right? So affordability is huge. And like, so I could go into affordability, like, so I think antitrust going after the monopolies, tariffs are a low hanging fruit, maximizing transparency with home insurance, health insurance, utilities. And so we open up the books and see how our money is being spent. So obviously legislation to give more insight into what's going on, but also if you're a monopoly, if you have um one utility company,
mhm.
needs to be additional federal legislation to put clamps on you to make sure your services actually reflect what you're charging people.
Right, right, right.
Right, but ultimately, I think it also goes back to labor. Labor is a huge thing. I think, I'm a I'm a proud well, I'm no longer a part of the union, but I was a member of the National Treasury Employees Union. We need strong labor, but also it's protecting our undocumented workers and our labor force. So I'm firmly of the camp. I think ICE needs to be abolished, and I think we need immigration enforcement. It needs to be rebuilt, but under its certain um so that's how the affordability for like that's like I guess my affordability stump speech. But the reality of it, you don't have affordability. You're going to hear Democrats say it, but the one thing you need in order for affordability to stay is accountability. You need, again, somebody to pay the price for what's going on. And that's government corruption, right? And so Trump's profiting and his buddies are profiting off the presidency. And that's passing legislation that actually lets, us recoup the cost of, benefiting from their positions. You're talking about cronyism, fraud. You're talking about holding corporations accountable, CEOs, not just fining them, holding them criminally accountable,
Yeah.
and whether they do market manipulation or collusion, and it's also the billionaire class. like we kind of mentioned, and like those high end, we know how much money, we don't know, but we know there's a significant amount of money that is literally being stolen from workers. And they're meddling in our election and they're destroying our government. And these people need to be held responsible. And until these people are finally held accountable and responsible, this cycle will continue. History needs to reflect that this is unacceptable. And so I think accountability is a huge portion of, our campaign. And if I make it to Congress, that is what I will do. There will be commissions and there will be a price to pay for, destroying what our country was. Again, it wasn't perfect, but, you know, it's destroyed our reputation and everything that our
Mhm.
forefathers fought for and died for. And they're just dragging it through the mud at this point.
I mean, the corruption is so just like, and now like, and I've been hearing about this more. I'm not a sports betting person, regular betting, but this whole the Kalshi in this new market of like you can bet on events and like multiple times. Like someone like started betting on when Nicolas Maduro would be taken out as leader of Venezuela, and they just happened to predict the right date. And now same thing with Iran, like the invasion in Iran, the bombing in Iran, like people were betting on it, which like, I don't know, if you're betting on war, someone said this on a podcast, if you're betting on war, like go to church first.
Yeah.
Like so yeah, there's definitely so much avenue for a corruption conversation that I would love
Yeah.
to see.
And yeah, and that's the thing is, and again, history is going to require this of us. It is,
100.
and it's just we can't, and it's just frustrating because even right now, you see like some Democrats are not. They're like, oh, we're trying to come up with an alternative war powers resolution. I just saw it a few minutes ago that gives Trump 30 days.
Right.
And no, like he's straight up, he's illegally doing whatever, right? Like at this point, the guy is off his rocker. There is no,
Yeah.
you cannot live in a reality where this guy thinks like you can pretend like you can analyze what he's thinking. We can't, and we
Right.
can't.
No.
And now they're saying Cuba's next, but we're
Yep.
in a position where we're significantly weakened, and we're fighting about all these, you know, soldiers weren't even prepared for this. They were in the like makeshift shelter that didn't
Yeah.
have defenses, and then now we're evacuating Americans all over the Middle East, but then we also don't have the mechanism to evacuate. And so you can't pretend like this guy's playing. I mean, he's played, they said 3D chess, 4D chess, 5D chess. At what point does it end? So right now, I my frustration, and I experienced this too when I was in government, was you need to shut this thing down. Like there is no like, hey guys, give him he'll come to his senses. No. People are losing their lives. People are like, and it's whether it's war or like what we saw in the federal government, it's ruining people's lives and it's ruining, it's just allowing him to muck everything up even more. And it's going to be left, for me and you to rebuild this entire thing. And God knows how many generations that going to take,
Yeah.
hopefully not too long, but it's just, yeah, it's heartbreaking. But, the one thing I will say is while it feels this is going to end, it is going to end. It's just how soon it's going to end. And then how long is the rebuilding going to take?
Yeah, you're right, and that's what as much as we all like despair because of there's so much, which is totally fair and normal, we should, but like you're right, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. There is a light. Like
Yeah.
we have to keep, you got to keep focusing on that and get it closer to you. So, yeah, I totally agree with that. All right. Well, I think that's a perfect place to take a pause and then we'll pivot into our final segment of the night, our shout out or shutdown, which is where we'll take an event, a person, something, anything going on. If you want to shout it out, throw some shine on it, let everyone know that's what we'll do. And if you want to shout something down, like no matter how silly and petty, like I shut down Love Island last week. So or no, Love is Blind. So like, yeah, however. So yeah, which do you want to do a shout out or a shutdown?
Man, I'm trying to think of What I'm trying to think of the other. I know Brian Nathan has a special election. I want to shout out to the
Yes.
Democrats with the upcoming special elections. Um, I think is Brian Nathan the only one in the area? I think
I
Brian.
think he's the only one with a special. We've got him
Okay,
coming up on the pod in a couple
so
weeks.
I want to take the opportunity to shout out Brian Nathan. I know he's in Hillsborough, but Brian is a hardcore union member. I've had the opportunity to meet him a few times. He he's a great guy, and he's going to do a fantastic job representing Hillsborough County. And this goes back to, again, this new generation of Democrats where we shout each other out, and again, and work with each other. And yeah, so shout out Brian Nathan. And I just want to make sure, I think he's the only one special election.
Yeah, I think he's the only one in the special that I'm aware of,
Okay,
but
all right, perfect. But yeah,
there's so much going on. Yeah.
our brother in Hillsborough, and yeah, so if just any people in Hillsborough, make sure to vote. Get Brian; he'll do good things. So
Yes, absolutely. And we've got him coming up on the pod in 2 weeks, I think. So
okay,
yes, we're
perfect.
excited to speak to him. I'm gonna do a shutdown. But this is just something that I want everyone to be aware of is that, we're recording this on Tuesday, March 3rd. Tomorrow, Wednesday the 4th, and then Thursday the 5th, there's going to be hearings in the Florida State House and the Florida State Senate on the anti-DEI in local government bills. So like that means that like we no cities could sponsor or have it allow prides. You can't fly any flags of anything. It's so far reaching and it's so ridiculous. And it's just taking local control. Like that's sort of been like the huge tenet of like conservatism for a really long time, and now all of a sudden they're like, we need to control every single bit of it. So yes, I'm gonna shut down that bill, but if you hear this in time, definitely give a call to your state rep or your state senator and let them know we do not want this bill to pass. So
100%.
yes. Alrighty. Well, that's all we've got for us tonight here on For St. Pete's Sake. Thank
No,
you, Earl, so much for joining us tonight. It's been so lovely to chat with you and get to know you more. And definitely we want to have you
yeah,
at one of our meetings in person at the Stonewall monthly meetings. That would be
okay.
awesome.
No, we'll be there. We'll make it happen. This is important to us, and it's, again, I think the bottom up and making sure. We're just shaking hands. I like, again, and I hope, people, whatever comes of this campaign at the end of it, whether we win or lose, but I want to make sure that that's not only who I am, but also the people who I've been lucky enough to have volunteer and come on my campaign is also who they are. And it's an inspiration to have these people, work their
Yeah.
asses off for you. And I, I'm gonna do the same for the people of Pinellas, and look forward to meeting everyone and shaking everyone's hands. All right,
Perfect.
but thank you guys.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you again. Yeah. So everyone, please remember to like and follow us. We're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and now Substack because Luis Salazar convinced me to start a Substack for the podcast. You can find us at all of those at forsaint.petesake. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen, and if you could leave a little rate and review, that would help promote the pod. We won't be back next week. We're taking a little break, but we'll be back the week after that. I believe that's when we've got Brian Nathan coming up. So yeah, please tune in again in a couple weeks for more stories of the people doing the hard work to make our community better. Until next time, for St. Pete's sake, keep pushing for change.